Kia ora and welcome to Unsung NZ, episode 2. Now I'm really excited because if you've heard episode 1, you'll know that it's all about two songs, the Body Electrics Pulsing and the Car Crash Sets Breakdown. So this is the lead guy from Car Crash Set. This is Nigel Russell, and I'm a fanboy, so that's all I can say about it. So Nigel is still part of the world of New Zealand music as a supplier and a sort of smudgy guru of equipment. He's behind the scenes, supplying us with all the yummy equipment that makes making music so enjoyable. Here I am, I'm a fan. This is episode 2 of Unsung NZ, where we share the songs New Zealand loves with the rest of the world. Let's get it behind the minds that make the music. Episode 2, Nigel Russell. Just like that, yeah. Hey, so yeah, this is, you're the second guest, so I'm no good at this. Now, of course, in my 0 episode, which is my introduction of myself.
Yep. I heard that.
Oh, you did hear that promo?
Yeah.
So you're in it.
I know.
And so that's why it was kind of important that I kind of
get around to it, eh?
And now you know why I get nervous and silly around you. And over chatty. Now you know. So this is a real easy format. I want to know. I want to know from the start.
Born and bred in Christchurch and emigrated to Auckland in 69, 70. So I've spent most of my life in Auckland.
Wow.
Because I'm old now.
Yeah, we all are. That's why I sort of started the this thing up.
Get us while you can.
Yeah, well, it started as a need to be valuable, and then Josh just came in as the first interview and was like, oh, hell, this is all very modern. So I'm going for what I'm calling lifers.
Legacy
and the future. So now I'm alternating them. So I already didn't know you were from Christchurch. So you would have been pretty young, though, coming up.
Yeah, 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah. And I am interested in the sounds you were growing up with. What were you hearing around the house and things? What's the...
Crumbs.
Nothing.
Like, come on.
Right.
You know, that sort of stuff. The
TV.
My dad's into classical music.
Right.
And was into leader, piano accompanied singing, you know.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Oh, that's a bit alive.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, that was kind of it, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you arrive here at 10 and 12, sort of getting into...
More 19, yeah.
Yeah, so 12's when you're really getting into stuff?
Starting to, yeah.
And what are you hearing?
Beatles, a lot of all that sort of, the early 70s sort of pop stuff as well, the bubblegum, Beatles, T-Rex, that kind of stuff,
And so do you hear, obviously, the punk thing's coming up, do you hear that in real time? Or are you...
No. Well, I ended up at Welwyn College, which is one of the more... liberal schools, I suppose. I mean, it was a co-educational place, and was a lot more free thinking, shall we say, than say Auckland Grammar or some of the others, Yeah. So did music there, and by that stage, I guess we were kind of listening to all sorts of stuff, Roxy music, Stones, all of that, I mean, I think the first concert I think I saw at school was Dragon in 1973, doing their first album.
They were flashed straight away.
Yeah, I know. It was the Hunter Brothers.
Hunter Brothers,
yeah.
I've sort of got some key questions I've already forgotten to ask. Anything we get too nerdy, I'm going to cut to the end as an extra special bit, so you can get as nerdy as you want.
Bonus nerd.
Deep nerdy tech stuff. So don't be afraid. I wanted to know, when we were skipping along there, the song that really affected you. My one was I Feel Love as a child, and then it was Your Car Crash set as an adult, which made me... What are your versions of that? What was the one... Or were you saying you weren't hearing much as a kid? It wasn't till...
Not, yeah.
So what was the one that flipped you? What was the one?
God, I don't know.
No strong...
No, I mean... Virginia Plain.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of things, I mean, the whole New York scene too was covered a lot by a magazine called Roxy,
right.
which we used to see here, and that was covering things like Television and Blondie and all that early CBGB stuff.
Yeah.
I
wonder how long CBGB really existed for. It's one of those ones where it's probably a smaller window than we realise.
No, it went a lot longer. But
it wasn't always that scene.
No, that's right. I mean, the scene changed around. It's a jean shop now.
Oh,
or something. Yeah.
You, of course, become on the radar for most of us with spelling mistakes.
Yeah.
And so, are you still at school?
Just out. Basically, punk hit 76, 77 for us here. And, I mean, one of the real ground zero moments, I think, was the Don Taite thing on... TVNZ. He was in the UK covering something else, and then also sort of covered the whole punk rock thing that was going down. And we had an approach, I think I was the chairman of the social committee or something like that when I was in the sixth form, and we had an approach from the guy who was managing the Scavengers to do a lunchtime concert, and gave us tickets to Zwines. And went and checked that out, and sort of that was it really. From there on, we were there as often as we could get there, and all the rest of it. And the lunchtime concert went down very well. And in subsequent years, we organised Toy Love, Tearaways to do lunchtime shows there as well.
At the school?
At the school, yes.
So what's Zwines? When you said Zwines, you lost me.
Oh, you don't know about Zwines?
Yeah, I'm not from this town.
Oh, okay. Well, Zwines was pretty much ground zero. Well, no, actually it wasn't. There were a couple of other venues prior to it, but it was pretty much ground zero for Auckland Punk, and it was above it's the old Bluestone Room, which you would probably know.
Yeah.
The first floor of that. It had been clubs over the years. But so you had to go along Durham Lane West or something, and then around the back of His Majesty's Theatre. But you also had to run the gamut of Disco d'Ora, which was downstairs.
Right.
So it was sort of running past that and up the alley to avoid getting punched out by the guys downstairs, who weren't that keen on punks.
Oh God, it's quite a shifty little corner too, isn't it?
Bit tricky. But it wasn't a licensed venue, so there was no problem with underage and all the rest of it. So they'd had bands like, Scavengers were the resident band there. The Idle Idols. Who began the Tearaways, etc.
What is that compilation? AK-79?
Yeah, AK-79 again was a real sort of line in the sand, as it were.
Absolutely.
It was one of the first. It was the first indie record, and it basically was a snapshot of essentially '78. Most of those bands were active, and. The original release was Tearaways, Scavengers, Swingers, Primers. I think all had 2 tracks.
So it wasn't a Flying Nun original?
No. It was Ripper Records. It was started by Brian Staff and Sean Doe. So basically the idea with that, I think, was to record a couple of tracks and then use what was generated from that to then do more records.
Yeah, cool. Just as you should in the punk era.
Yeah.
That's right. Because is it Reena? That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You just, literally laughing out loud like a...
Yeah, well, it's a personality-driven song, shall we say? And there were quite a few personality songs of that period.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the Scavengers classic, Mr. X, was written about Mick Lesbian, their lead singer who'd left to become a 9-to-5er social climber. Proud Scum, Jump Off Grafton Bridge, or Suicide 2, was written about John Atrocity, their guitarist who decided he was going to leave the band.
Oh, God.
Reena was written about someone, and they didn't like it, and so we were threatened with violence, etc. And so changed. So whenever we used to play, the name would change, and who wants to be it tonight?
Right.
And then we'd insert their name. And then when Brian wanted to release it, we had to fix on something, and it became Reena.
Oh, now because there is an energy to the hating it. It works so well.
Yeah, well, it's also on Bigger Than Both of Us,
right?
Which is the Propeller compilation,
yep.
Which came a couple of years later, and I had it on reasonably good authority. The copy that was at BFM at the time basically had a diagonal line through it, not a line that followed the grooves, but one right across the middle of it, so you could not possibly play it.
Wow. Sabotage. Oh, I love that. You were doing spelling mistakes in that 79.
Yeah, so I had a band at school, and we played out a couple of times, and one of the times we played out was at HQ Rock Cafe, which was on Upper Queen Street, open for the spelling mistakes. And when the bass player from the band quit, they offered me the job. And
right.
Yeah, so I took that.
And you've been playing bass for how long now?
Badly for 35, 40 years.
Oh, no, I mean, at that point, yeah, no, it was like, it must have been only a couple.
Yeah, about a year.
Right.
Yeah.
And how long did that last?
About 2 years. I think we went through 79 through late 80, 81, I think it was.
You moved pretty seamlessly into...
Yeah, reasonably. I mean, basically the band imploded. I mean, we had... we'd inherited the boot boy, boot girl following,
right.
After Proud Scum had left and gone to Australia. And it was a mixed blessing. The blessing was you had a crowd every time you played, but the mixed part was they'd usually smash the venue up and intimidate everybody else and, etc.
Because there's a sort of a drug scene to punk that, again, as a small town kid, you don't quite know if what's real and stuff like that, because you're just school kids at this point. It wouldn't be...
Yeah, well, I mean, that was also at the height of the Mr. Asia thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, heroin was around. And, in fact, I was actually at the Swines one night with some guy who OD'd and died.
So it was real?
Oh, yeah, very much. Yeah.
And so, but not affecting sort of your school-age kids too much?
No.
It's just what those...
Not really. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole again the Mr. Asia thing was heroin and Thai Buddha, and it was good weed at the time.
Yeah, so you went either way.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to lose those boot boys, are you?
Well, basically, what happened, we were basically banned from every venue in Auckland.
Yeah.
So you played, you couldn't go back essentially. So there was, I believe, we'd actually heard too that the Auckland team police had sent out a letter to all of the pub owners saying that if we were engaged either under our name or any other name, they might potentially lose their licence.
Wow. So
it came to a point where all we could play was either gigs we organised ourselves or Main Street or Excess, which was another unlicensed venue. So basically wound it up.
That's weird.
Yeah.
And just to even be the police to even be aware of it is...
Yeah, well, the police presence was fairly heavy back then too. It's not the police that we know and love these days.
Right. And was there also a bit of imagery coming from the UK that this needs to be stamped out and it's a bit of media crap?
Don't think so. I think it just
They did wreck the place.
Yeah. Well, literally, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, our first headline gig at the Station Hotel, and Station Hotel front doors were sort of 2.5, 3 metre what do you call it, reinforced glass doors.
All right.
Well, reinforced glass doors only last a little while.
Yeah, God. Oh, no. There's not. Yeah, you wonder why these venues disappear.
Yeah.
Get slowly chipped away.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that and the demolition ball,
Yeah, God. So we are now what? We're now in 1980?
Yeah, 80, 81.
So when does Joy Division hit your radar?
About that time,
Yeah.
we were getting that sort of stuff on, import and all the rest of it, and Unknown Pleasures was a very strong album.
Yeah.
Well, it was that, and there was a few of Magazine, basically that sort of post-punk, the Sound, Concert Angels, all that sort of stuff. It sort of seeps in and comes out. I'd been doing some singing because at university was in the university singers, doing music there, or had been doing music, and that was a prerequisite. You had to be, in one of the two choirs. So I thought, well, I'll give that a nudge. And another friend from primary school had a band called the Cadets, and they were looking for a singer. So went and tried out that, and that became Danse Macabre.
Because you do your front man very comfortably. Is that something you had to build? Did you sort of...
I'd been involved in musical theatre through school, and so it wasn't too big a leap.
Right.
Yeah, you just sort of gird your loins and get on with it, Yeah.
Yeah, because I love some of the old videos, and you're really nailing the front man thing, and it's just like, that seems proper.
Well, there you go.
That's proper.
Thank you.
So when does the electronics sort of...
Well, about then too. I had an interest in synthesis right through. It had, I guess, had heard things like Tomita and Switched On Bach, the Wendy Carlos stuff, and then. Autobahn, of course, was a huge hit. About 81, it would seem that you could either buy a guitar or get, you didn't really have to know anything. It was very much make it up as you went along. And around the same time, you had the price of some of that electronic stuff was starting to come down, and so you had bands like the early version of Human League, The Normal, Daniel Miller, Thomas Lear, who were so it was if you could either buy a guitar or buy a synth and create your own thing, and it kind of diversified. Yeah. At that point, but it still had a very DIY ethic to it.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% electronic, so it was like, once I heard Kraftwerk, it was like, oh.
Yeah, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Well, first synth I bought was an electronic dream plant, Wasp.
Oh.
And the Wasp was, and this was part of the whole sort of egalitarianism of synthesis, I guess. It was an English thing, and it was the first synthesizer that you could buy that was £199. Everything else was sort of had been, 500, 600, 700 quid.
Yeah.
And it was a 2-oscillator synth with some good modulation possibilities and things. And it also, rather than a keyboard, it had a touch strip which was painted like a keyboard.
Oh, yes.
The way it was built, it was just one great big circuit board, and the keyboard part was actually part of the circuit board. So it was simple. It was very simple to make. Oh. It was pretty plasticky. Used to run on batteries. Had a little speaker built into it as well, so you could take it anywhere, and quite sophisticated for what it was.
Wow.
But I bought that at an auction. A music shop in Gisborne had shut down, Brett Sheriff Music, and they moved everything up to Auckland and had a big fire sale and sold it all there. And I bought that there, and it was all on from there on.
That's amazing. I have no idea. I think I've seen something similar with a sort of a strip and a key,
yeah,
and a trigger almost instead of your finger.
Yeah, that was a bit of stylophone, the Rolf Harris thing.
Okay, so Danse Macabre did quite well. I remember in the student world there, that was sort of...
Yeah, I mean, we basically burned very brightly for a very short time, shall we say. Went for about 2 years, and we did an EP and started work on an album, but the band broke up midway through the recording of the album, so it was kind of the record company decided to sort of release it as a mini album to recoup what had been spent and try and make something of it.
Where were you recording all that?
Mandrel.
Right.
So the studio de jour was Harlequin.
Right.
And we did some demos at Harlequin. And then Trevor Reiki had returned to New Zealand in about 81, and he was worked for a label called he had Stun and started Reaction Records,
right,
and was looking for local bands to put through on Reaction, and Reaction was kind of like a house label at Mandrel. They weren't initially interested, but Trevor persevered, and we went on and did Between the Lines and Last Request.
Right.
Yeah. So it was kind of a that relationship then carried on into the next thing, Incarnation as well.
Right, which is Car Crash.
Yeah.
And so that just sort of is. How do you end a band in the middle of an album? It's just somebody leaves.
Or got fired.
Oh.
Or leaves, yeah. So, basically it was kind of, as I said, it burnt very brightly and very intently, and it was it was just a parting of the ways, shall we say. Well, for a long time, yeah. But, fast forward to 2008, and we reformed and did a show. This is Macabre. Did a show at King's Arms, and then in 2013 did it again with Penknife Glides because they wanted to do a show. So they said, "Oh, would you reform and play with us as well?" So we did, and as a result of that, Wes, who was the guitarist and the principal songwriter in Macabre, he and I continue to make music to this day.
There you go.
So we've sort of come a full circle.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we have a project called DM Redux.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's good to know that that's cooking along. And Car Crash Set was almost an experiment of...
Well, yeah, that came after...
what am I missing?
Running under all of this, my day job was working in a music shop. I started in music wholesale, sort of behind the scenes, working for a guy who was importing Roland at that stage.
Yeah, cool.
Into New Zealand, and a few other brands, and I had left him and started working at Kingsley Smith Music down in the bottom of Auckland, down on Custom Street.
I think I've met you there as a child.
That is probably where you did.
Yeah.
So that was a real hub. That was the rock shop of the day. It was the cool shop. And we had a lot of stuff, and a lot of people would come through, and I was selling synthesizers,
right?
Because that was the everything that was really cooking at that stage, and we hooked up with a guy called Nick Jenkins and Dave, and jammed around, got some songs together, did 3 demos at Progressive Studios, which was in Anzac Ave, which was run by Terry King, who was a guy who had done front of house or sound for Danse Macabre and Spelling Mistakes, actually.
Wow.
We gave some tracks to Propeller. Simon put one of the tracks on a compilation from 1982 called We'll Do Our Best. And then Nick announced he was moving back to the UK So it was kind of like, Then Dave approached me, and he'd booked some time at a studio called Genesis, and he'd had an idea for a track. So he said, come on, let's go and sort this out. And that became Fall From Grace.
Wow.
So we started recording that at Genesis, took that to Trevor, finished it off at Mandrill, and then did a deal there where we were basically signed to the house label, signed half of our publishing away to that, and that meant that we could use the studio during downtime.
Wow, cool.
So, that was after hours and weekends, essentially. And, in terms of the owner of the studio, Glenn, it wasn't a big investment. All he had to do was pay the wages for the engineer and tape costs and electricity.
Yeah.
And but we basically had the run of a full 24-track tape studio.
Wow, that's a joy.
Yeah, it was.
Because it has got that feeling that there's some production going on. And
Yeah, well, that was. I mean, and the fact was, we weren't, because we weren't paying for it. At the front end, you weren't watching the clock and going, "Oh shit, this is costing us $200-300 a day, or whatever the rate was." And we could go, well, I wonder what this sounds like if we tape this Oratone monitor over a snare drum and pump some signal through that. What sort of noise will that make?
Wow,
and
the real stuff.
Yeah.
Because you quite casually go over quite a few studio names, and it's sort of like a lot of these I've never heard of, and it's, they're all pretty much gone, aren't they? Like,
yeah, they all have. Yeah.
What's left now? Sort of
Roundhead.
Yeah, true. That's very fancy.
Yeah. Stebbings have always been there.
Yeah, well, it's a mystery to me in that building. I don't think I've ever been in. I just see the neon.
Worth a tiki tour if you get time. Well, Stebbings was basically what has been there since Adam was in shorts. And but around that there were, again, as the cost of technology became cheaper, there was Harlequin Studios had originally started in Mount Eden Road, and then they set up a sort of a state-of-the-art room in Albert Street on the corner, just long gone. It's been a car park now for 25 years. Mandrill, similar sort of thing, that had started mid-70s in Parnell, and that moved to a bigger facility as well, and again staying in Parnell, when Graham Meyer and Lynch came back from the UK. Yeah, they were all partners with Glenn. Glenn had been in 60s band The Gremlins, and I think Graham had worked with Tony Visconti, and Mr. Lynch had been working with Cat Stevens and people like that. So all very big time.
Yeah.
So Harlequin and Mandrill were the two big rooms in Auckland at that stage, and Harlequin did a lot of the Propeller stuff. So things like the Mimis, Blam's albums were all done there. Whereas Mandrill, Hello Sailor.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, Sailor album was done at Stebbings. Yeah, and the Dudes as well, because Ian Morris was one of the engineers at Stebbings.
Oh, right. Okay, so you have started working in music retail. Is this parallel with university, or
No, I
bailed the university?
Bailed after 18 months out of uni. So went into, as I say, music wholesale, and then did a year or two of that, and then transed into retail, and that's basically what I still do today.
All right, yes, of course. This
kind of thing.
Full of bits and bobs, actually. I was thinking before, it's like,
how many bits did you get from me?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's why I come to you. It's just like, I can't be
yeah.
bothered. It's like going to a record store where someone's already choosing records for you. It's like, it's already done. All the crap's been washed away. They didn't drag
sorted
it
through the chaff.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate it. So when do you feel like you pulled out of recording?
Basic Car Crash set went for, what did we do? We went from about 82, 83 through to 87. midway through that, Dave decides to do his OE.
Right.
And he's working in London and says, "Oh, look, send me over the master tape, the 2-inch tapes for one of these tracks." And so we'd already done an album by that stage. We've been working on on some new tracks, and so we sent the 2 inches to Dave. He went to Blackwing Studios in London,
Nice.
who were the house studio for 4AD pretty much. And he remixed or mixed the track with a guy called John Fryer, who'd done, the Small Coil and all these people. And his mixing style was pretty interesting. Apparently only would work in 30-second segments of a track and then chuck it all together. And the first track that came back, East and West, was just jaw-dropping. It was, it had gone away as one thing and come back as something completely different.
Wow.
So we ended up sending the remaining tracks that we had
Right.
across, and John did the rest of them for us. And that became our Another Day EP, which came out of, and then we were working on some more tracks and did some supports in Auckland for Shriekback. The second time they came through, a friend of ours who was a label A&R guy at Festival, who was also looking after Shriekback, invited them along to one of our sessions. So we had the drummer, the guitarist, and the backing vocalists come in and add tracks.
Wow.
And then the whole lot went back to the UK. John mixed it again, and that's where it stopped.
Right.
So it never was released until recently, until relatively recently. And the band just kind of ground to a halt, really.
Yeah.
It's, there was no sort of big, bust up or anything like that. And at that stage, Trevor had been out. We'd invited him to play guitar on the second track we recorded at Mandrill, and he'd been in the band right through. And he was running Pagan Records by that stage, and had a young signee, a band called This Boy Rob, which was a two-piece, which had Greg Johnson. And they did an EP, and then Greg had a bass player called John, he was in the TV industry, I think, and decided that he wanted to carry on with that. So Greg was kind of at a loose end. So Trevor introduced us and himself, and we nabbed Joost Langveld, who had played in a previous band with Greg, and we became the Greg Johnson set. So, I played with Greg did 2 albums, two and a half albums, shall we say.
And how does a one-fingered synth player involve themselves with a...
No, well, you wing it.
You wing it? Yeah.
Just did what we did.
Yeah, I've done the same.
Yeah, exactly.
One-handed.
Yeah. So I played on things like Isabel and some of those things.
Yeah, he seems a dedicated lover of the craft of song.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. He's dedicated his life to it, and it's a job, and he works at that art.
Yeah, no, you've got to bow to that.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
So I basically left that halfway through Vine Street Stories. I think I played on one track on that or something.
Yep.
And again, it was kind of by that stage, I'd settled down a little bit. I had a proper day job, and I had our first child, Jasper, and I think that Greg was also making plans for a move to Australia, and having seen what happened with bands that go to Australia, I figured, it was probably time to move on.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you that CCS still continues to this day.
So that's why we need to know about future stuff.
Due to the wonders of the internet, we were approached in the mid-2000s by a German label and a young guy who was into electronica, who had a label, who had a copy of our first single, loved it, wanted to know if we had anything else, and could, particularly the early stuff, demos, etc., and could he release it?
And do you have those tapes?
Well, we rummaged around, dug some stuff up, sent them to him, and he created a compilation from that.
Wow.
Called Welcome to the Car Crash Set, which is the last line of Warm Leatherette,
yes.
The B-side of TVOD by The Normal,
wow.
which was pretty much ground zero for DIY electronica.
That is that's a key piece right there.
Welcome there
to
it
Car
is.
Crash
Welcome
Set.
to
It all makes perfect sense.
The Car Crash Set. So this is on a German label called Analog.
Oh, yes.
And he released that as a limited edition. I think he pressed up 500 and sold out. He's since done a second run of it.
Wow.
And then he put out an APB to his artists, saying that he was going to maybe do a compilation release for the label's 10th anniversary. And would anybody like to donate a track, or old or new? And Dave contacted me and said, do you want to start jamming again? So see what we can come up with. So we started doing that.
Wow.
And we now have a project called CCS, as in SISIES.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it is, in Spanish. So we have, again, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours worth of jam stuff. We've done a release end last year, just a very limited run vinyl. Sold a few to pay for the ones that we've given to people. And we have our next release on the way, which is a 4-tracker.
Oh, cool.
With the jam stuff, we've basically given it to friends to untangle, for want of a better description. So first record, we had a mix done by Nick Rowan, who was formerly of the Skeptics and Bail to Space and things like that. And Nick's done some more for this new record, and then the B-side was, or the other side was a mix by Jed Town, Fetus Productions. Yep. And so the next record is all Nick mixes.
Yep.
And the next one after that could be a Christian one if you want.
That's right. I was just thinking, I can get my hands on those.
Yeah, exactly.
If anyone hasn't seen the photos, we'll get them. But your space at Oceania Audio Sales is quite a legendary space now. So when did that collection start? This is the massive 90s digital synthesis collection.
Oh, and 70s.
There's a bit of... true.
I think the oldest one there's about 72. That happened pretty much 2013. We did a second reunion show with Danse Macabre. And it was kind of like getting back onto a bike. Mm. The interesting thing, I guess, with playing in a band is you never the interpersonal relationships and the way a band plays and things is something that you never really shake. And I mean, Spelling Mistakes have reformed and did a show in 1999, I think it was the first one we did, and because we had a live tape from the last show that we ever did, so we could remember the songs. And Warwick, the guitarist, transcribed everything, and once we started playing, it's just it sort of takes one rehearsal, and it's kind of like the what's the word? The muscle memory comes back, and it all just kind of gels. And the 2 or the 3 or the 4 people that make up the thing, it can never be. It can, if you change any aspect of that, say you take the drummer out and put somebody else in, it changes. But when it's still in its original form, it's like getting on a bike again. It's like it's it all comes back.
Right, amazing.
So the same thing happened with Macabre. We got together again, did the show. Bass player went back to South Africa where he lives, and the three of us that were still resident here kind of went, well, that was quite fun. Why don't we just carry on and see what else we can come up with?
Right.
And by that stage, I had a few synths at that stage, and it just kind of went from there, really. So we carried on as a three, just having a weekly jam, and with no prerequisites. It was a sort of a case of having a couple of beers and okay, here's a bit of a beat, and we're in D minor tonight, guys. Off we go and see what happens. And due to the wonders of modern technology, we're able to record everything that we've done. That's been a kind of a weekly fixture, or bi-weekly or monthly fixture now since then. So 7 years.
Awesome.
So I've got days and days and days and days and days of recordings. Some good, some not so good,
That's what you do. You go through them.
What you do. And so that's kind of how that's rekindled my interest in electronica and electronic instruments. And I've just kept an eye, things like Trade Me and stuff like that. I've kept an eye out. And of course, you kind of know what things are, or some people don't know what things are, and things are often offered as broken when they're not, and so on and so forth. So.
The hunt.
So it's kind of the hunt, and that's
No, I was sort of trying to get a focus on what Oceania Audio Sales. It's your sort of overview of what because it's all the nice stuff.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how I see it. It is audio tools for the discerning.
Yes, it is. And sometimes the ones who are slightly more professional can afford.
Yeah, but it's also it's also gear that I would be, if I was doing it full time and making records and stuff like that. It was stuff that I'd want to use myself. So it's so consequently, I mean, when I started at Oceania, it's basically a sound rental company, and they were dabbling with sales. As the company was growing, they were looking to buy more equipment, and buy equipment at the best price. And it sort of got to a point where they would turn around and go, well, if you're ordering this much, do you think you could sell some for us in New Zealand? And so you'd pick up an agency for a couple of brands. And they sent me to a trade show in London in 1994. Because we had become distributor for a couple of English brands at that stage. And at the show, I discovered a couple of brands there. One of them was Octava Microphones, which was a Russian condenser microphone, which prior to that, condenser mics had always been very expensive. And this was something that was a large diaphragm recording microphone, which was under $1,000, which was unheard of at the time. So I secured the line for New Zealand, and it just kind of developed from there. My focus became, I guess, more recording orientated.
Yes.
You just kind of network, and as you see things that you think, oh yeah, I'm interested in it, so somebody else might be able to use it, and so on. But, you riff from there.
Yeah, because I was thinking you're sort of more future-proof now, as there is a boutique audio industry around the world now.
Oh, very much, yeah.
There's two people doing it.
Yeah. And guys, it's with some of the different formats of gear, like you have a thing called 500 series, which is you buy what they call a lunch box, which is a common box which has a power supply and inputs and outputs. And into that you can fit modules, and modules can be preamps or compressors or EQs or delays or etc. And the beauty of it is that every time you buy a piece of kit, it'll just slot into the slot. And it's you're not having to buy a power supply again and a box and connectors and all the rest of it that would come with a piece of kit. And it's also a very small form factor. Yeah. But it's also enabled a lot of boutique guys, or guys with a slightly wackier idea than to enable them to sell stuff that they might only sell hundreds of rather than thousands or hundreds of thousands, you know.
Yeah. So I need to know what piece of music that you feel like you're involved with you're most proud of, because I'm going to end on it.
Probably probably one of the first CCS, first car crash set thing.
For this podcast, who should I be?
You should have a chat to Alan Jansen.
Yeah,
definitely. Alan's Body Electric, and they were contemporaries of ours in the early electronica thing. Or Nick Rowan, actually. Here's a story. Alan was, when he was in the Body Electric, was driving back to Wellington after doing shows in Auckland, and fell asleep at the wheel, I think, and had a fairly horrible accident on the way back.
Oh, God.
And we sent him a telegram wishing him the best. And it was, get well soon and welcome to the car crash. We've been great dear friends ever since.
That's a good. Well, that's a good place to end. I'm glad I got this down. You got anything you want to say? What are you trying to push?
Nah,
No.
Peace and tolerance.
That's right. God.
Yeah.
Is this the last time I'll see those eyes? A feeling like this, it's too hard to try. Don't try to tell me you're only just my friend. It will never reach you. It will never end.